Hi, everybody. We are here today with Andy Healy, who is the creator of the amazing 101 MJ 101 series, the ebook series that you can find online. We'll put all the links up today. They're a free ebook series, and we're here to find out all about it, deep dive into that. Welcome, Andy. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great. We have Emma with us. Emma, you're here as well we're in London. Andy, you're in LA.
Correct, yeah.
And we hope to see you all from around the globe, different time zones we know, but thank you for being here with us. We have lots of questions for you, Andy. First of all, could you take us back to when your interest in Michael Jackson began, how it evolved and led you to creating the 101 project?
Sure. So as a young kid, there was always music in my house. I had a brother who was 4 years older than me. So he was always kind of like constantly introducing music to me when I was like 5 and 6 and whatnot. And then kind of around sort of off the wall thriller era was when I alone discovered Michael Jackson, not 20 million other people. and yeah, and it was just it was almost like the first time that as a young kid I was discovering a musical artist that was mine, that wasn't a shared thing. My brother actually couldn't stand him. So it was kind of like, okay, this is what I'm gonna like latch on to.
Mhm.
And then was a fan ever since. And what led me to actually creating the MJ 101 series was it was around actually 2009, and it was just before This Is It was announced, and I was sort of as a fan, in various groups, just fed up with how Michael was treated, even within music communities. It was kind of like he wasn't recognized. It was almost like the media narrative had overtaken that personality, had overtaken him being seen as a musician, an artist, songwriter, producer, all those things. I'm also a massive Prince fan, and you kind of, you saw the imbalance between the two there. So I was like, oh, okay, well, with my friends, I would always be, compiling, best of, like, what's your best this, what's your best that, always having those discussions. And so I thought, oh, okay, well, let me see if I enjoy writing. So let me see if I can, do something that starts discussions around Michael's best stuff. So I started working on that. Then This Is It got announced. And then unfortunately, Michael passed. And at that stage, I kind of like just shelved it because I didn't want to be seen as sort of, trying to take advantage or trying to, exploit anything. So I just thought, I'll let it be for the moment. And it almost felt like at that stage, unfortunately, too late, but people were in the wider mass community were kind of like discovering Michael as the artist again. It was kind of like all the tabloid stuff got forgotten, and the focus was put back on the music. So I thought, okay, well, maybe that's kind of done. And then, the thought just kept occurring with me, and I saw, Joe Vogel's book came out, and I was really impressed with that. And it kind of just piqued my interest again in kind of doing something from a fan point of view. So that's when I kind of really dug into sort of completing The Greatest Songs, which was the first one.
Okay.
And then that started the journey. I thought I would just do that, and then I would just go, oh, what about if I do this, and what about if I do that? So
Wow, that's great. So you've been a fan a long time.
yes, very long time. Yeah.
Yes. So how old were you in the Off the Wall thriller era? Maybe ask.
Oh, so let's see. For Off the Wall, God, I was like 5 or something. Thriller was kind of the sort of peak period when I was buying stuff, and every single that came out, I was making sure I had my money saved so I could go get the 7-inch or 12-inch, and it's when everyone of that era kind of got, I mean, you couldn't ignore Thriller, and being a fan and seeing the music videos and everything that just came out. It was that kind of you know, taking it to the next level. And
Yeah,
I felt fortunate, kind of like being along for the ride.
absolutely. Yeah, and I suppose, you know, you said the the 101 greatest songs was the first project,
Yeah,
and in many ways that was probably harder. And well, first of all, you were a witness to the journey of, you know, Michael Jackson's career as an adult,
yeah,
witnessing it as a fan. So in one way, it was easy to, you know, compile that list, but also probably hard because every song has a memory as part of your life, as part of your life memories of what the stage that you were at when you were a fan.
for sure. Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things that I love talking to people and kind of like saying, you know, when did you discover Michael and what's your favorite era? And sometimes it matches up for people. They're like hardcore, I'm bad all the way, and you know everything else is great, but bad is like the pinnacle.
Yeah,
And then there are people who came in with Invincible,
yeah,
and people who've come in post 2009.
yeah,
So it's you know, it's interesting for me having kind of like been through each release. Um, you know, being able to kind of, as you say, reflect on, well, am I really drawn to that song because, you know, that was a great moment in my life, or that was a bad moment in my life, and this music spoke to me,
mm-hmm,
versus it being a really great song.
mm-hmm.
So I try to make sure that um, that it's kind of more about a criteria being met than just necessarily my own personal favorites.
Yeah, we got a question for you about that in just coming up in a minute about Criterion. Before we get on to that, what's your professional background that brought you the skills that are required to put this sort of project together? You know, what's that journey?
Sure. So as a kid, I played multiple instruments, did my own songwriting, was
Mm,
kind of very much into my family was quite musical. Um, I then sort of, you know, discovered the joy of writing and would write short stories and kind of mini plays. And I actually remember I wrote a whole, um, I guess now would be like a jukebox musical, but all around the Thriller album, kind of like the
wow,
story of these characters, and it was like from the whole every track. And
wow,
um, look, I don't know if it was any good, but I enjoyed doing it. And then, you know, through high school and through university, I was working music stores, and then I was still doing, you know, playing music. And then I got into advertising on the creative side of things, so sort of a copywriter slash art director.
right.
And so I've always just loved storytelling and loved writing and loved discussing and dissecting music. Um, so it felt like a natural kind of progression to bring all that together and hopefully contribute something to the fan community that's of value.
Yeah, yeah, right. I can see it's an evolution. And what about how long does it take you to put? Well, how long did it take you to put the first book together? And have
Well,
you got
yeah,
faster?
I have. Sorry,
Have you got faster with each project?
not really. Yeah, I mean, the first one, as I said, it kind of started, and it literally started with the joy of iTunes and playlists and things like that, where you could kind of dump everything and then listen to a song, listen to the next song. Okay, I move that one up. Listen to that. Listen to this one.
Mm,
Okay, that drops down. Um, and then what I would do is I would try to listen to, once I kind of had the list of what I thought was the songs, then I would try to listen to every song in different formats. So I would listen to what it sounded like on vinyl, what it sounded like on an old cassette, what it sounded like on an, as you know, an MP3, and even it happened to me the other day, strangely enough. Um, Listening to it on different sound systems, listening, having the music play, but being in a different room to actually see
mm,
what would jump out at me. And this happened just last week. I was playing Smooth Criminal through my Sonos system, and I was in one of the rooms that didn't have it. And like a wood block kind of percussive sound jumped out above everything else. And I was like, is
ooh,
this a remix I've never heard? Or like, it was the most bizarre thing. And I think it is when you just tune into different sounds, you can really discover the breadth and depth of the music. So, um, so that was kind of like the starting process, and that was probably the longest, apart from maybe Invincible. That was probably the longest because I wanted to make sure I was doing everything right. I wanted to kind of like check everything and then pull it all together. And how would it look and feel? And that was probably the longest one. And then everything after that, the short films, remixes, performances, and album stuff became a little bit easier. But the problem is I'm self-published, so I don't have anyone kind of nudging me saying you've got a deadline of and sometimes I'll create a false deadline where I'll just announce something on Twitter saying, oh yeah, this is coming out, and then it's like, okay, I better write this now.
Yeah, that's good, right? That's good, but then you hate yourself for doing it too.
Yeah, and look, and Invincible's actually it's coming out, I promise. But it's been the hardest one because this is the third iteration of it. I wrote it initially back in like 2019, and then I scrapped it completely. Just deleted the whole file.
Really?
Started again last year, and then got to the same point, and then deleted the whole file.
Oh my gosh!
Started again. And the reason for that is, as an album, I have a lot of criticism of the album, with sequencing and runtimes and things like that. And I found that I was putting too much of my own sense of, and it wasn't until more recently when Invincible to me is a great album of a collection of individual songs that if I just listen to that song by itself, I actually really enjoy. But if I'm listening to it as a journey, I kind of feel like the sequencing's off. And it took me a while to discover and almost like crack the code of Invincible and why I could now start to really appreciate it. And I kind of go into that journey a little bit in the forward to the Invincible ebook that will be coming out. But
I really need to read this then. I really need to read that about the journey. Yeah, I appreciate what you said. Yeah. Wow. So let's get on to the criteria then. So people want to know, how do you begin to even create lists with, Michael Jackson's catalog? It's so big. Do you work out what the criteria needs to be and then go with that? Or is it not really about the order, for example, in the greatest songs, not so much the order or the performances, but it's about which ones make the list? And also this is like an add-on. What did you think about our poll that we did with members this week to see if they agreed with you or not about the performances one? So first of all, the criterion, and then about the poll.
Sure. The criteria is sort of different for each one. So the only ones that are really rankings in a sense are 101 greatest songs. You got the short films, performances, and remixes, and then the rest are just sort of per album. But for those, I definitely sit down with the criteria at the beginning. So with greatest songs, it was all about impact and influence. It was like, what are the songs that were really impactful, both on Michael's life and also on the music landscape and beyond that, pop culture and all of that. And then the influence, obviously, is that's part of it as well. So you can have a song like "You're Not Alone," which is impactful because it was the first number one that had ever debuted at number one, all that sort of stuff. But for me, as a song, is it up there with some of the other tracks? And so it would start to kind of, as I said, I would, literally dump everything in and then just start moving stuff up. And then when I got to 101, someone actually said to me, what was track 102? Which I thought was a fantastic question.
What was it?
I'm trying to remember. I was like, honestly, I know I've got, actually not on this computer, on one of my previous computers, I've got the original kind of playlist. And so I've kind of like got the mark of where the 101 was. I'm trying to think what 102 was. I can't remember if I call out.
If you can't remember, then that's a question we're going to ask everybody to be interactive. We're going to ask everybody who's viewing or viewing later, what do you think 102 should be or was? And then we'll
Yeah,
see if they were right. Let's see how intuitive we all are
yeah.
with you.
And look, the whole purpose really was not to be like the definitive list. I don't think you can ever have a definitive list. But what I was trying to do was encourage people to focus back on the music and encourage them to sort of, okay, well, what's my own top 10 or my own top 20 or my own 100? And you think it's easy. You think, oh yeah, okay, I can tell you my top 5 songs right now. And you rattle off and by the time you get to number 3, you're kind of going, oh, hang on, I've only got 2 spots left and there's 10 more songs kind of vying for it. And that's what I love. I love that kind of pain. So, you know, and I'll do it occasionally on Twitter. I'll be like, okay, the MJ top 10 challenge. And it's like literally create a playlist, take a photo of it, upload it, and you can only have 10 tracks. And it does. What I love is that it does make you sort of assess, you know, okay, well, yeah, this song's definitely my top 3, but then, you know, the next part. And that was, you know, part of the joy and the challenge of 101 when you've got that breadth. You know, how do you really, you know, for all time, where does that land in something? Where does Gone Too Soon? Where does Speechless, which I don't think actually made the list, and a lot of people called me out on that. You know, and now since we've had, you know, the Escape album and other unreleased stuff sort of see the light of day, I need to go back and start including, you know, what would I include from those of the original recordings? What would I include in those? So yeah, it's always interesting and fun for me, and hopefully for the people reading it, to either passionately disagree with me or think, oh yeah, he's kind of right there, or whatever.
So this is a question for you, building on that. As a lifelong fan, are there some songs that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you would have rated really highly on impact and influence, but since then, and when putting the 101 songs together, actually, you know, didn't include it or put it far down the list because with retrospect over time, things have come out of the wash, or other songs have come from albums and just had life of their own, so to speak?
Yeah. Definitely that's happened. The one that is actually, it's almost like the reverse. It was a track that I really didn't appreciate back in the day. And then, and that's PYT. You know, during the whole Thriller era and beyond, I was like, yeah, it's an okay song, but it's a little bit too boppy and like, and it wasn't until I would say maybe 10 years ago that I really sort of discovered what I love about PYT, and that's like the bass line in it, and you know, multi-tracks are now starting to swirl around, and I love that. I love being able to kind of get into and isolate stuff and kind of do my own little remixes and reworkings of them. And that was like, for me, one of the first ones I worked on, because it was like, it's not a song that I really love, so maybe exploring all the multiple layers. And it literally was, you know, the na 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 section, which I'm not a huge fan of, but when you take that away, there's this really funky bass line that's going underneath, little bubbling synths and organs and percussion and it's like, oh wow. And so that to me made me really appreciate something. And then as you said, and then as you say, there are songs that, you know, from Off the Wall or Thriller that you might go, oh wow, this is, or maybe a song off Destiny where you go, wow, this is such a powerful song. And then as time goes on, it's like, wow, it's a really powerful song, and there's 20 other really powerful songs. So where does, you know, That's What You Get for Being Polite rank up against Stranger in Moscow, you know? Or Time Waits for No One against Human Nature, or you know, so something that of its time and of its period, you were like, oh my god, this is like the greatest thing ever recorded. And then, you know, 10 years later, as you said, there's more to kind of assess and enjoy, and even stuff that you do catch yourself in the moment going, I love this for its moment, but maybe it doesn't stand the test of time.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's other songs that have almost two lives, like They Don't Care About Us.
Yeah.
You know, so we appreciated it in '96 when it was released, I think, and I think in the UK anyway, it got to number 4.
Right.
There were the 2 different musical videos. One of them was banned, and you
Yeah.
had all that, and it was really causing the, kind of a ripple or whatever, in terms of its message. But then Black Lives Matter comes along, and the song explodes, and then now on YouTube, They Don't Care About Us. The video is it the second most viewed under Thriller? That's is it, or third? Yeah. Maybe Billie Jean, Thriller, or They Don't Care About Us. We couldn't have guessed that would be such a big YouTube success in the last 3-4 years.
Yeah,
so that's another example.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a perfect example of a song that was definitely powerful and had its impact and influence in its moment, but has had a potentially a greater legacy than some of the other tracks off History, because of its broader social context and its increased meaning over time, sadly.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, so how do you do your research? What sources do you use? Obviously, you've got your own history because you're such a veteran fan. But what are some of the go-to books when you're doing research on Michael's music?
Sure. With 101, I didn't necessarily do a lot of research in terms of looking at other books or anything like that. There's just, I think, as all of us as fans who really dig into stuff, we're reading constantly, we're reading interviews with this person, that person, so it all kind of would just stick in here. But as time came on, obviously Chris Cadman's stuff on the record, and then I mean, the Maestro collection of books are just invaluable. And what I love about them is if you're doing a project like this, or you're listening to a song and you're kind of like, oh, I want to know a little bit more about that, you can dig into that. So it's almost like afterwards kind of discovering more and kind of doing research like that. So Chris's books have been invaluable. There's obviously biographies, and Susan Fast's Dangerous is a great read. There's just so many brilliant discussions and investigations into the music now, and so they're great to kind of be able to reference and resource and hopefully give credit to. When as time's sort of progressed, I've been fortunate enough that Brad Sundberg has actually become a really good friend of mine, and have kind of met him many years ago when I first moved to LA. He was doing the seminar at Westlake Studios, so it was like, I have to just come along to this, and I ended up coming to I think they had 3 or 4, and I ended up coming to like 3 out of the 4 or something, and it was just amazing. And I've built up a really nice relationship with Brad, and attending all the seminars that I have, and been in some situations where I'm almost like the fan representative, I guess. If there's a panel discussion or something, he'll invite me up to sort of sit and talk to Matt Forger and talk to Brian Vivitz and Michael Prince and Brad Buxer and all of that, and kind of they'll all be talking in their of the moment reflections, and then I'm kind of like at the end going, oh, but what about, and sometimes I'll mention something and they'll be like, how do you even know that? And I'll be like, oh, I read an article back in whenever. And so I've been very lucky with that, and that's been a great source of reference when specifically writing for the more album centric stuff. So being able to sort of talk to the people who were around when Thriller was being written, being able to have discussions with John Barnes to kind of influence my take on things. Obviously Brad's invaluable, and the amount of information that he has, and what I try to do is be respectful of those conversations as well.
Yes.
I never want to take something which I know, for example, Brad has shared in a seminar or something, and then kind of run off and try to pass it off as, oh, look, something that I discovered. It's like, no. So if it's anything like that, I tend to just go, okay, well, wow, that's a really juicy piece, but I'm not going to write about it because that's not my story to tell. But if it is something about, you know, the 92 different mixes of Billie Jean that took place or whatever, it's kind of like it's well known. So then I will kind of be able to include that in my discussions of stuff. So I try to be respectful of those relationships, and, you know, if it's a broader story that people are aware of, then kind of include that in some commentary, I guess.
Wow, that's really interesting. And actually that answers Sherry, one of our moderators, asked the question, you know, did you interview with anybody who worked directly with Michael on his album? She asked that question. And I suppose, you know, knowing that you have had, you know, listened in on those professional discussions and, you know, retrospectives around those albums and how they were made with people like Michael Prince and Brad Buxter and Brad Sonnenberg, that is just wonderful for us as readers of your ebooks to know that you're coming from that place, from within the conversation. But obviously, like you said, you know, just picking up on all the facts, but having their ear and in a way their blessing too. It's a great thing for us. That's really good. Thank you. So how long has it taken you to write all of the ones that you've done so far? Like, has it been how many years have you been writing these books for?
I actually had to, let me just refer to my notes, because I kind of realized I've dropped off. So 101 Greatest Songs was released in 2013. Short Films was also released in 2013. So I was kind of productive. Remixes came out in 2014, History 2015, Performances 2015, Off the Wall and Dangerous in 2016, Bad 2017, Thriller 2018, and then nothing since. And I've got here Invincible 2019 scrapped, 2020 scrapped. So it's kind of been, you know, that's sort of the period of time I've been working on these things. And a lot of time it is, you know, so for History, it was coming up to the 25th anniversary. So it was like, oh, okay, I want to, or 20th anniversary. So it's like, okay, I want to work on that. For Off the Wall, it was around the 30th anniversary. So I try to know that the focus is going to be back on it. And hopefully, again, just start a conversation that's focused back on the artistry in my small way.
Yeah. Sherry also wants to know, you know, did you have a favorite that you know, to write? Did you have a most enjoyable, most interesting to write?
Okay, so my favorite one was probably the 101 Greatest Songs, because I had no pressure. Like, not that there's pressure now, but no one was expecting anything from me, so I could just do it the pace I wanted, do it how I wanted. And then that was kind of like, and it was the first one to give away and say, okay, I'll put it out. Let's see if anyone enjoys it. And then that was probably the most interesting, either that or actually the short films, because by that stage I'd written a lot about the music. And so it was interesting to kind of change the mindset of, okay, well, Michael's also a brilliant visual artist and worked with some amazing people. So how can it becomes less about, oh, this is a great song, and becomes more about, this is a great visual representation or a great narrative or a great experience to have watching and listening to something. It kind of takes it to the next level.
Yeah, definitely. What made you give them away for free and decide that this was going to be a free project?
You know, I have joked with people before. They said, oh, you should sell these, and it's like, yeah, if I sold them, that I'd probably have sales of one. and I'd have to thank my
No
mum
way.
for that. But
No
you know,
way.
as I said, it started out, the intent was just to get the focus back on Michael's music
Yeah.
and artistry, and I wanted to start discussions. I
Mm.
didn't want to be like the be all end all, here is the definitive list, but I wanted
Mm.
to be something that started. And I thought the easiest way to do that would be to create it as an ebook, put it up online. Hopefully people can discover it and download it, and then it's theirs.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like the start point of it. And then I just wanted to be true to that
Yeah.
all the way. There is part of me that would love to compile them all into and print them up and have it be a beautiful book. But you know, it's not an avenue that I'm overly interested in terms of. I mean, there's so many much better books out there, like physical books to get and have and reference. So, I enjoy the fact that, and also to try to make it. I mean, as much as I love, holding a good book in my hands and that tactile experience, which you guys all know about.
Yeah.
But there was something about trying to make it that if you were, somewhere and you had it on your iPad or you had it on your iPhone or whatever, you could just kind of pull it up and, quickly scroll through stuff. And I guess it's just trying to make a small contribution into the discussion, and making them free, I thought, was the easiest way to do that.
Yeah. Well, we at the book club think that it's a fantastic contribution to the serious musical journalism that, as you said at the beginning, was extremely sparse for most of Michael's life, which is a huge, we could dwell on the fact that it's a huge pity that he didn't get to appreciate these wonderful analyses that have come about since his passing. He got to roll his eyes at the junk instead that was written, even in serious magazines, music magazines. He didn't get the respect that he deserved. But we think it's a wonderful contribution, and the fact that it is free, it's almost activism too. It's fan activism that it's free. So we really appreciate that side of it. We also appreciate that because it's accessible, those that are non-fans who would not bother to pay for a book on Michael Jackson can read it for themselves, and they have all of that amazing kind of knowledge and analysis that you've put together for free at their fingertips. And the other thing is that young people who can't afford to buy books yet, they're still young, they're in school, they're learning, they have access to that. Us as older fans and older readers, we love collecting our books and showing off our collections. But we have the means to. When I was 20, I was around 20 in the Invincible era, and it took all our money just to buy the album. So we really appreciate that the books are free, and we don't think the fact that they're free devalue them in any way. In fact, we think that it's music, it's activism that you've done that, and we just want to tell you that to your face so that you knew. We appreciate it.
That's very sweet of you, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
But also, I would add that amongst the avid collectors, I don't just speak for myself. If you manage to make a paper printed copy of all of them, I'm sure it would be very successful commercially, because this takes us to another question about the photographs. The photographs that you've selected are exquisite. They're beautiful. They're part of the whole experience of reading the books. And we just wanted you to really tell us a bit about how you come to choose the pictures that you chose.
Yeah. So again, I kind of, it's easier when it's off the wall or bad or thriller, or because then you kind of, I always go, okay, the pictures have to be of that era, from the recording through to the promotion or tours or anything like that. And obviously with the performances in the short films, it kind of makes sense that they're honed in. But with 101, when I first started, obviously there's a lot of music that doesn't have any visual representation to it. and so it was a lot of kind of like scouring and finding images that I thought either represented the song or the era, or complemented what the song is about. So it was a lot of kind of like trawling through my own books that I have, and great photography and magazine articles and things like that, and sometimes scanning stuff myself, and really trying to make it visually appealing as well as hopefully enjoyable reading. And you know, again, because you're kind of working on a screen format, initially sort of designed for iPads and things like that, I wanted kind of, you know, there to be pages that were, if it was in a book, would be a double page spread. So it would be, you know, hefty and kind of, wow, there's a great image. And so I'd spend a lot of time tweaking images a little bit in terms of the quality of the image. And then just trying to make sure visually they were represented, and if it was going to then be displayed on a retina screen somewhere, that it was, you know, still powerful enough to make an impact and hopefully draw people more into the experience of reading it. One of the things that I tried to do from the writing side of it, you know, was, and especially with the ones that are more focused on the albums, was I try to write to the pace of the song. So I try to write about the strings in Don't Stop Till You Get Enough when they kick in. So if you're listening to it and reading along, kind of like by paragraph 5, when I start talking about Michael's falsetto or start talking about the stacked harmonies, that's what's sort of playing.
Wow.
I don't
That's
know how.
incredible. I need to reread some of these now. My goodness.
And, you know, and that's why some of them, so when it's about the performances or about the short films, then I can kind of waft on and, you know, do pages on it. But when it's about trying to reflect and give as much value to the listening experience, and kind of have people learn something as they listen, is sort of the design of those more album-centric ones. Yeah. And a lot of people have said that they've listened and kind of enjoyed that. It's kind of like being the accompaniment to the great album.
Wow. Well, that's really, really interesting. Gosh, I love that. I'm going to go back and listen to a few, you know, with the headphones on for sure.
Yeah, and if you're a speed reader, then I'm out. I can't do it. Like, yeah, I haven't even got to like the first line, and I've already finished this. So,
no, we're good. So, could you imagine the 101 series in some sort of documentary format? Because you know, like multimedia.
Yeah, you know, that's a really good question. I think if anything, it would. No, I don't know. It would probably make sense if I was going to pursue something, and I've thought about this a little bit, of like doing a podcast series, especially on the 101 greatest songs, and kind of like doing a podcast series that deals with 5 songs at a time, and kind of really. But there's so many, you know, there's so many great podcasts. Or I mean, you've got John Cameron's JC Musicology, which is just brilliant. Just the way that he will go into a project and discuss it. So, you know, it's kind of like, as much as I would love to do that, there are so many people doing better than I could possibly ever do, that I'm kind of happy staying in my lane. And then, you know, I've done discussions on the MJ cast and things like that. Yeah. So it's great to sort of be a part of that world and help people have discussions and stuff. But yeah, if anything, maybe a podcast. But as I say, there's people who are doing, you know, Damien Shields' one on Thriller and things like that. There are people who are doing amazing podcasts already. So yeah, I don't think anyone needs to hear from me.
Oh, no, not at all. But I take your point. Yeah. Okay. Emma's got some questions now. I'm going to hand over to Emma.
Sure.
So Andy, you do a lot of writing for Albumism. We've seen a lot of that on Twitter, and you know, it's clear that you really write on a range of artists, on a range of songs. And actually, one of the most read is the article that you wrote for All For You by Janet Jackson, which was really interesting, fantastic piece. But when I was seeing, you've obviously got a huge scope in music, and I wondered why you decided to kind of focus your efforts on Michael for the ebooks.
Really great question. Again, I think it goes back to kind of Michael. You know, for me growing up, my trinity of musicians or artists was Michael, Prince, and Janet. It was kind of like, you know, they were the people who I mean, you know, I loved everything from Living Colour and Depeche Mode and a whole lot of, you know, I love all kinds of music, mostly. But yeah, they were kind of like my three kind of key passion artists. And I think because Michael was like one of my earliest discoveries as an independent kind of listener, following his journey and kind of seeing how, as I said, you would have a discussion, you would read, okay, so a perfect example is Dangerous came out in 91 and Prince's Diamonds and Pearls came out within a couple of weeks, if not months of each other. And the reviews for Michael's would always talk about his personal life before it got to the music. You know, is he wacko jacko? Is he still sleeping in a oxygen chamber? Is he still hanging out with the Elephant Man's bones? And you'd kind of have to dredge through all this stuff before they actually got to how brilliant the music was. Whereas with Prince, the reviews were always like, you know, the prolific, multi-talent, you know, multi-instrumentalist, writer, producer, arranger, does it all again with this great, and it's not to obviously be a knock on Prince, he's phenomenal. But what I sort of discovered more and more as time went on, that the focus on Michael wasn't necessarily on the music. And so that's what made me kind of like go, okay, what can I do as a fan? And I was in, you know, online groups and various discussion groups and stuff, and be talking about Prince on Prince.org and talking about this and that. But there was always, you know, never felt like there was the right sort of discussions happening around Michael. So I thought if I could do something that added to that. And then, you know, Chris Cadman, who, you know, is just phenomenal, invited me, and Jay Leggett invited me to become a part of the Michael Jackson archives on through Facebook. And again, it was kind of like, oh, this is a place where people are focused on the artistry. They're not necessarily focused on which outfit do you think Michael wore best, or, you know, weren't his curls fantastic in this period? And that's all valid discussions that people want to have, but it's just not a discussion that interests me. So I want to kind of talk about what was the visual representation of the music, how, you know, who worked on stuff, like how was this produced, how did it get recorded, why was a song like Little Susie written back in the Destiny Triumph kind of period and then not touched or released until history? You know, why is that? What is that journey? They're the kind of discussions that light me up personally. So it was great to sort of find a space by that stage that was more welcoming. And you know, as I said, I felt like, as someone who had received so much joy from listening to Michael's music growing up and beyond, I wanted to do a small part of maybe helping other people who were maybe coming to Michael's music post 2009 and kind of like thinking, wow, where do I start? It's kind of like, okay, well, maybe start with this and listen to these songs and then go off and listen to this album and then whatever, just to hopefully be a starting point for people maybe on their journey.
You've spoken a lot about kind of your intentions for writing the book, and you spoke a lot about, you know, kind of wanting to create this discussion and get the focus back on Michael's music. Kind of what's the reception been like, you know, towards you for these books? Have you had lots of feedback from people? Have you had lots of messages from people who have said, you know, thank you for writing this. This is, you know, exactly what Michael's legacy needed, or this is what I've personally been able to take from this book. What kind of feedback have you had?
Look, I've been fortunate that it's been very well received. And, you know, I do get emails of people saying, why isn't this song included? Or why didn't you? And I always love those discussions, because I will always say to someone, okay, tell me why it should be included. You know, what do you hear in it that, you know, and a perfect example is Speechless. I think Speechless is at once one of Michael's purest vocal performances, and on the other side, I feel like is totally saccharine and just, you know, loses it. I love the opening and end part, and then the middle part, just for me, wasn't his strongest. But then I would have people say, well, why isn't Speechless, and blah, 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 or why did you rank this so low? And I would ask them, okay, well, what do you hear in it? And those sorts of discussions are really rewarding for me, because someone who's really passionate about a song will make me go back and listen to it with fresh ears. And kind of like I set aside all my stuff, go, oh, okay, I can see, you know, that they love that it's very Disney-esque, and I love that it kind of plays to Michael's whimsy and delight, and that it shows the breadth of an artist versus, you know, a hard-hitting song like Morphine. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, all right. And then that helps me kind of with that reassessment. But yeah, I've been fortunate that people have been kind enough to, if they've found it enjoyable, have reached out through social or anything and said, hey, I've really enjoyed reading it. When's your next one coming out? Or thank you for doing this, because maybe they've just discovered and they've gone, wow, there's 9 books to read. Okay, great. I'm downloading every one. Let's go. And yeah, that's very, very kind of people to even bother to want to say thank you. So yeah.
One of the things that I wanted to raise actually was something that you said earlier about the fact that there's, you know, so many sort of more amazing printed books out there, and obviously this is a book club, right? So, you know, we kind of spend all day, every day discussing different books on Michael, which at the moment we've counted sort of around 250 printed books on Michael at the moment. And honestly, your series just comes up so regularly, as you'll know, because you're kindly a member of the group, and you must see how often your series comes up, and the positive comments towards it, and how much people genuinely not only love it, but genuinely appreciate the effort that's gone into it. The fact that they're free, you know, we've obviously had that discussion, but that's such a beautiful thing for fans to have, and for it to be free. We know that the intentions there are you know, I feel like it's something that is very much amongst the fan community. It is hugely appreciated and hugely loved, even within the vast array of books that there are available on Michael. Yours is definitely up there, you know.
I appreciate
so
that.
Yeah,
that's very kind. And yeah, and it is nice.
One of the things that I was interested in is on the 101 list, you've placed Billie Jean at #1, and I wondered whether that is your personal favourite, or whether you think that just kind of objectively it is like musically the pinnacle of, you know, all of the songs that he put out. Is that personally your favourite song of Michael's?
I would be hard pressed to, I mean, it's always kind of super cool to say, you know, really deep cut, oh yeah, I really love, you know, or an unexpected something, yeah, I really love Morphine, or I really love something else. But I think when you look at Billie Jean, you know, and what I write about is that it has so many different hooks in it. You know, you've got the guitar hook, you've got the bass line hook, you've got the drum beat, you've got Michael's stacking of the vocals, the way that Michael sings the verses versus the choruses, the extra drum fills as accents, you know, there's so many different melodic hooks that, to me, even if it wasn't a Michael Jackson song, I would still be going, this is like one of the greatest songs ever written. And for me, it's also a really impactful moment for Michael, because not only do you have a great song, you've got, you know, one of the most inventive short films for its period that just changed the game for people. You have obviously the Motown 25 performance that just took it to another level. And there's so much iconography also tied into that song from a live performance point of view, from a visual performance with the short films. But when you take all that away, when you just get back to the actual song, I think you would be hard pressed to find another 6 minutes and 20 seconds that just captivates you and makes you want to move and makes you want to listen and makes you want to dig into the lyrical content and make you want to kind of discover, wow, what's happening now? And, you know, I really envy people who are new fans, who are going back to discover old albums, or even fans who aren't necessarily Jackson 5 or Jackson fans, who are going back now and kind of, you know, pulling out Skyrider or pulling out something and listening to it and getting to hear stuff for the first time. When, you know, I always joke about a little known track of Michael's, when it's kind of like, yeah, how can you have that on an album that sold 20 million? You know, how do you have a little known track? But there are people who are still discovering stuff. So to answer your question, is it also a personal? Yes. I mean, it's definitely, well, without doubt in my top 5. And whether or not it nudges something else out sometimes will depend on my personal attachment to another song. Like Stranger in Moscow, I think is just like on par. You know, but I also love a song like Working Day and Night, just because of what it brings from an energy and percussion and production and songwriting, and a lot of those early marks of Michael vocalizing. And so for me, there's a lot of great moments throughout the catalog. But yeah, when you do kind of, you know, pull up the playlist, start going, okay, where do I place this? And you'll kind of notice, yep, Billie Jean kind of keeps nudging its way up. What are your guys?
I think, I think Billie Jean has to kind of be on most people's, right?
Yeah, and I appreciate that people say, it's just so overplayed. And it's like, okay, but if you can take that away from it, just listen to the song. But then,
Yeah, Billie Jean's definitely my top 5 for all of the reasons you just said, but I couldn't say them like you say them. But yes, Earth Song is another one that is just exquisite to me as a piece of art. You know, to think that, you know, Joe Vogel can write a whole book on a song tells you a lot about that song. So
yeah, and the fact that it really has no chorus. There is no sing along. This is, you know, moment to it, like a Billie Jean, or like The Way You Make Me Feel, where you've got the kind of like great chorus. There isn't really that in Earth Song, and it's one of the, for a #1 hit, it's very unconventional. And that's one of the other things about you know, Michael's success always seems to belittle the importance and the innovation that he had. That a song like Earth Song can get to #1. If it was by any other artist, it would probably be lauded a lot more. But because it's by Michael Jackson, and everyone's like, yeah, but it's Michael Jackson, of course it's going to be a #1 hit. You know, that's like saying, well, that's a Picasso, of course it's going to be a great painting. It's like, but yeah, compared to what I can paint, you know, or compared to what anyone else is going to be able to paint, you know, so to me, that's also the interesting thing with Michael, is his success and his overwhelming impact on pop culture sometimes works against him from being appraised as an artist and being praised as a musician and a songwriter. I mean, it's very rare that you get someone talking about Michael as singer-songwriter Michael Jackson, right? There'll be singer-songwriter Billie Eilish, there'll be singer-songwriter Ed Sheeran, and automatically it imbues a bit of borrowed credibility to what they do, and you sort of have to assess it in a certain way. Oh, well, they're the singer-songwriter in the tradition of a Bob Dylan, in the tradition of a so-and-so. And it's like, well, what's Michael if he's not a singer-songwriter?
Yeah.
Yes, he also beautifully interpreted other people's music and other people's lyrics, and did it in a way that completely made it his own. You can't imagine anyone else singing Human Nature with such connection to the song than Michael. And anyone else who tries to do a cover of it, you just kind of go, yeah, that's nice. But Michael brings that OYs in, and Michael brings all the other stuff that wasn't there present in the original intent of the song, and just owns it and elevates it. And I think, people will say, oh, but he was working with Rod Templeton, and he was working with Quincy, and it's all the production, it's all the factory that's pumping out the hits. And it's like, okay, but does that diminish how great a song is? And don't do it to the point of diminishing Michael's actual input and value to that song. I always argue Rod and Quincy went off and produced other artists and wrote songs for other artists. And I don't hear people talking about those songs 30 years, 40 years after they got released. Has to be something about the person doing it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. That's the answer. Yeah. I could listen to you all day. Absolutely.
Andy, I had one more question for you before I hand back over to Jeanette, which was, what an amazing, I think, sort of credit to you, really, that the Michael Jackson estate has quite widely sort of promoted your work, which is absolutely fantastic. I just wondered kind of what your involvement was with the estate, if you did have any, and what are your views on kind of how they're handling Michael's legacy? Is there anything more that you would like them to do, or you think they should do?
I had no affiliation with the estate. Okay. I was surprised that they picked up something that I wrote in Albumism, and I was delighted because, again, it kind of like put the focus on the music. It was a quote that I wrote for History, and was kind of like, oh, wow, okay, this is kind of cool. And it's, it's, to me, it's the same way that if an artist with Albumism, if I've written about something and, I've had artists retweet it or comment on it or pull something out from it, and you feel, wow, okay, well, they see something of value in my take on it. So that was a surprise to me, but it was a nice surprise. What do I think of the estate? I think there's obviously been some missteps. There's obviously been some major challenges for them in the last couple of years. And I think for me, the biggest point is you have to protect the legacy of Michael's music, and you have to look at what he left us with and be able to take a high quality approach over just putting anything together to try to release stuff. I'm always torn. There's the completist in me that wants to hear everything that Michael ever recorded for an album, and and kind of wishes that it's almost like, the Prince estate when they release 1999 or Purple Rain, they kind of like go, okay, and here's everything, or Sign of the Times, here's everything he was recording at that time, from a 2-minute demo through to full-on songs that never made it. And there's part of me that is like, oh God, that's what I want from the Michael estate. But then I also think there's a degree of quality control that has to happen, because Michael was so much about that. Do I want to hear another album of contemporized music? No, it's not my thing. You know, I always talk about Escape as a great album of demos with a bonus disc of, you know, reimagined workings. I think there's some quick wins that the estate could do. And I think there's ways that they could really build Michael's legacy and bring the focus back. And I understand the last couple of years have been quite challenging for them from a legal point of view, but putting the focus back on Michael as an artist. And for me, you know, do we need another X anniversary of Thriller? Probably not. But if they did, Thriller as it was originally recorded, the full length versions of songs before it got whittled down to fit on vinyl, we've got the capacity now to do that on digital, you know, and CDs. So why can't we have the full length version of Lady in My Life as part of the Thriller album, the full length version of Billie Jean as part of that album? Because that's what the original intent of Thriller as an album was. And then because they weren't happy with the sound of it and the pressing, and so they had to cut tracks down and down to fit more on side A and side B, then give us that now. You don't have to get Akon to do another remix or whoever. We definitely don't need Pitbull on anything. But you can go back to the original source. And the other thing I would do is, you know, as a fan growing up, I loved going out and getting the 12-inch of Another Part of Me or the 12-inch of Smooth Criminal or whatever, and hearing the dub mix and the a cappella mix and the tribal mix and the full extended dance mix with a false fade or whatever. And so I would reissue all of those. Like, okay, here's every original 12-inch record, and like put it together as individual releases so that you can go out and get Leave Me Alone, you can go out and get Black or White remixes. And because there are a lot of fans who have come in at various times who don't have that catalog, and it's not necessarily overly readily available online in good quality. So yeah, I would start there. That's the work that he left us, so let's reintroduce that to a wider audience now. And people are buying vinyl again, so why not have them, you know, be able to go and get the 12-inch version of Bad that's got, you know, 5 different mixes on it, and The Way You Make Me Feel, and all of this, and put it together in such a way that you can buy it individually, or you can buy it as a, you know, a box set that's just like pristine and beautiful. And yeah, and then I mean, look, I've got a million ideas of what, as I think all of us do, of like, well, this is what I would do if I was in charge. And, you know, and I think, unfortunately, the fan community, well, it's not unfortunate, but the fan community is so passionate about their own relation to Michael that there are some people who are saying, if Michael didn't sign off on it and it didn't see the light of day, it should never see the light of day. And I really respect and appreciate that. Then there are other people who are like, gimme, 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 gimme. And I kind of understand and appreciate that. And so for me, it's more about what does the next venture that they're going to do, how does it help contribute to the legacy of Michael? You know, Michael is an artist who is going to be around, regardless. You know, if the estate never did anything again, Michael's music will still be around. It's just their job, and I love that Prince is now involved with the estate, because I think it's their job to protect the legacy and ensure that it continues, and ensure that the right discussions are being had, which is of Michael being, you know, an amazing songwriter, producer, performer, visual artist. You know, we have to focus on those things and kind of elevate that, in my opinion.
Fascinating. Yeah, and there's a lot of love for what you're saying from the comments I'm reading. Absolutely. Right, so we've got a few more member questions that came up in the post this week. The first one is from Nixie Camadan. She asks, from your research when you were doing Off the Wall and Thriller projects, did you find out why Michael Jackson decided to put "Wanna Be Starting Something" on Thriller instead of Off the Wall? Very specific question, so testing you there.
And I first of all, I don't know the answer. I mean, that would be something I would love to have, people who were in that session kind of talk to, because even though Michael may have written it at that time, doesn't necessarily mean that it was presented as a possible track. He didn't present Beat It until Quincy was kind of like, I know you've got something else. What else have you got, kind of thing. So I would love to know from Quincy, was it even presented? Did he even hear of it at that stage? Or was it something that Michael was doing off at Havenhurst and kind of tinkering away with, and he himself didn't feel was ready? I mean, I would love to know what it would have sounded like in the scope of Off the Wall and Off the Wall's production style. But to me, it very much lives in the Thriller, on the Thriller album, and in that era. I honestly don't know. I wish I did, because it would satisfy a question I've asked as well. As soon as I kind of, as soon as we read that in Moonwalk, it was like, well, what? Okay, well, straight away we're like, okay, where does it exist? Does it exist? How did it sound? What did it do? So sadly, I don't have the answer to that.
Well, I think Jeanette might have frozen. So the other member question was, so it's from Sherry, and she says, can you please clarify this about Thriller? Recording sessions would last until November 8th of that year and would see the team whittle down a collection of 30 songs, since inflated to numbers in the hundreds by Jones, to the final 9 that would make up the album. So finish quote. And Sherry said, I've heard others besides Quincy say that it began with reviewing hundreds of songs as well. What were the 30 songs?
Great question. And I think within context of, I guess, what we know that Michael actually recorded versus songs that may have come into Quincy or passed over Quincy's desk and he listened to. And I mean, we know that Human Nature came about because they were pitching a completely different song, and it was on the B side of the tape. So the research that, and again, it kind of like goes back to being a fan for that period, and hearing the stories of, there were interviews where Quincy would be saying, oh yeah, we looked at 30 songs and we looked at this and we looked at that. And then over time, it was like, I think the last time I heard something, it was like, oh, we looked at 900 songs. So that's, they may have done, but how much was that like really considered? But when you look at what was recorded, so we know that Slapstick was recorded and that evolved into Hot Street. We know that Carousel was recorded, Got the Hots, Nightline. We know that there are songs of that era, Nymphet Lover and Trouble, Rolling the Dice. We know that there's at least another 10, 15 songs that were recorded or presented at that time. And this is a part of me, a little digression, but as a fan, when you would start hearing those songs and start going, oh, really? Like Trouble could have ended up, or Nightline could have ended up, or Carousel could have ended up on Thriller instead of, like, it was like, I would be like, oh my God. And you can almost hear from a lot of those early songs, like Carousel, like Nightline, obviously with Starlight, you can sort of hear where they bridge the sound of like Off the Wall and where they go into moving beyond that into the sound of Thriller, what eventually ended up on Thriller. So if you take a song like, I'm not a huge fan of Carousel, because to me it kind of feels almost a little bit yacht rock, and it's kind of like going off somewhere else. But I know a lot of people who like, oh my God, just sing and get lost in it. It's like, okay, that's cool. But yeah, for me, it's like, well, do I want that, or do I want to be sung something, or do I want Beat It, or do I? Okay, I'll take I'll take Beat It, Billie Jean, and Human Nature, and Lady in My Life, and PYT, and all that. So yeah, in short, to answer that question, it was a lot from the research at that time and knowing what tracks were recorded, and also what music was actually registered during that time period, and comments that were made closer to that time than years and years later, where people may have conflated stuff or had another assessment.
Yeah. And then one last fun one from Sherry. Being a fan for so long, can you moonwalk? Did you ever learn to moonwalk?
Yes, I can. I'm one of those fans that would, the new short film would come out, or any live performance, and you'd kind of have it on the video, and he's standing, he'd be, okay, that's what I got to do. So yeah, it's kind of like, whenever I'm playing music around the house, I'm still kind of dancing around and doing stuff. And yeah, Michael was a great dance instructor.
Thank you for answering that one. Okay, so we're just coming to the end of the interview. We've got just 2 more questions for you about the future, really. Firstly, do you have any? You've mentioned Invincible, but do you have any more titles for us in the works for the future?
For Michael, I haven't started on it, but I have had an idea about how to look at Michael's lyrics, and kind of almost like have a top 20 lyric. And that could be a phrase that wouldn't necessarily be the whole song, but kind of, or trying to find a way to, maybe it's 101, I don't know, but trying to find a way. And I kind of like know in my brain how I want to represent it. It's just, that would be a big task to kind of execute how I want to. That obviously Invincible. I think I need to go back and revisit 101 and kind of like do a second edition, because there is some, great music that has come out from sort of Escape. There are 1 or 2 songs that probably deserve to be considered within that group. And then, yeah, I've also started work on a Jackson's 101 greatest songs, from the Jackson 5 through to the Jacksons.
Wow.
Because I think, again, for a lot of fans, there are some fans who are like, oh no, I'm just a Michael fan, and I'm just a off the wall through to Invincible plus sort of those solo albums. That's the fan I am, and it's like, great. But then there are also people who maybe are coming new, and they don't necessarily realize, there were a couple of, they might know I Want You Back, ABC, The Love You Save, I'll Be There, because Michael did them in concert, but they don't necessarily know other deep cuts from the Jackson 5 era or the Jacksons. And again, it's just a fun kind of way to keep me entertained, of like, okay, well, where would I place the things I do for you versus Skywriter or Looking Through the Windows, or where do I place all of that? And then I've also started work on a Janet 101. Because again, I feel like Janet's another artist who, deserves more props than she gets. And I've begun work on a Prince 101, because there's just so much great Prince music, and I'm a huge Prince fan. But I don't know if I'm necessarily the right person to write that. So I'm kind of, I like the idea of broadening what I'm writing about in the 101 series beyond just Michael. But they clearly take me a while. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see how we go. And if there's, I've looked at stuff like duets and like stuff that he's been featured on and things like that. Like, what are the best you know, could there be something around those? And yeah, but I don't want to end up being kind of like the playlist of Hero Michael's 20 best love songs and Hero Michael's 20 best, you know. I don't want to kind of devolve myself into that point. But yeah, look, I don't know. Cut to 6 months' time when I'm like, hey, MJ 101 love songs.
Oh my goodness. Well, the Jacksons and the Jackson 5 sounds like an amazing project. There'll be so much love for that. And like, there's a lot of need for that because, you know, Chris Cadman's done a lot of work, obviously, in bringing the two catalogs together so that, you know, fans can read it as a whole, which is very difficult without those books, really. But that would be wonderful to have as part of the 101 series. And the Janet one sounds fantastic. You know, I'm guilty of not having done enough research into Janet. And there lies the educative value of the 101 series you've created, Andy, because I know that if I went to a Janet 101 that you'd created, I would get that, you know, instant in-depth research into which tracks I should be listening to get a real feel for the artist, a real 360. So yeah, wonderful.
And look, and I think sometimes you know, people feel like if they are a Michael fan, then they have to be a Janet and a Jermaine and a LaToya fan or whatever it is. And I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I kind of say if they're doing great music, then yeah, I'll listen to it. And more often than not, they are. But it is, you know, as I said, growing up, it was Prince, Michael, and Janet for me. They were kind of like the three, from a solo artist point of view, they were the three for me. You know, and so I feel like I can tap into appreciating that. And, you know, my work on albumism kind of explores everybody else that I kind of love. And I get to kind of write little mini retrospectives on those albums. So yeah, just look, as long as as I said from the beginning, you know, I'm just trying to start a conversation. And if it does start a conversation or it starts a journey of discovery for someone, then, you know, okay, I've contributed something. So that's nice, I think.
Well, you absolutely have. And, you know, there's a lot of love, obviously, in the book club for what you've done. So a big thank you for that. And thank you for being with us this evening in Europe and this, well, midday in LA. Looks so sunny there. It's so nice and sunny. But thank you very much for being with us and for being an active member of the book club. We love all your wisdom and comments you bring. So
no, thank you. I really appreciate it. And thank you guys for having the book club in the first place, because, you know, for someone like myself who loves to sort of read everything I can on Michael, good, bad, and indifferent, when I learned that, oh, I didn't even know that book was out, or I didn't even know that was being, it's always great. And I think you've built a community of people who are rightfully passionate about getting the right story of Michael out, and people who can give you a really unbiased opinion on a book and kind of say, yeah, well, look, this is what I took from it, and this is what the value is, and I highly recommend it, or yeah, I wouldn't recommend it, or whatever it is. And I think that's part of the journey that all of us are on in terms of discovering new information or discovering new things to invest our time into. So I think it's really valuable, and I appreciate being a part of it. So thank you. Yeah,
thank you. You know, and in this day and age, that's the way we need to do things as critical readers and listeners. We have to discuss together in that sort of democratic forum, and that's definitely what we're about. And you know, the members make up the community, as you say, and all of them bring so much. And absolutely wonderful when, you know, content creators, authors, journalists as yourself are part of that. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.